Welcome to Industrial Voices, the podcast where leaders in manufacturing, e-commerce, and logistics share stories and insights on the trends shaping their industries. I'm Bradley Dunn, a commercial real estate broker specializing in industrial real estate across the Southeast. Let's get after it. Well, welcome, Mary Beth Flournoy. So for those of you that aren't aware, Mary Beth sits in Atlanta, Georgia. She went to Agnes Scott College, got her MBA from Georgia Tech. Prior to working at Norfolk Southern, she was at Georgia Power for 14 years, most recently as a business recruitment manager, and now she helps to lead the industrial development for Norfolk Southern across a 22-state territory. For those of you that aren't familiar, Norfolk Southern, and I would imagine it's very few of the people listening, but Norfolk Southern is a leading U.S. freight rail company operating a 19,000-mile network across 22 states and is a Class 1 rail line, which we can get into. And then specifically for Mary Beth's role and who it is that we have here today, she oversees strategic partnerships, site readiness, GIS strategy, ready prime sites, contract services, capital budgets, and international business development. Quite literally the intersection of real estate and the industrial space, more so rail. And then she works closely with companies, economic development partners, site consultants, and internal teams to promote rail-served industrial growth. So I'm thrilled to have you on. I have interacted with the rail industry for a very long time. Usually it's in little snippets where I'm jumping in and out trying to figure out a piece of a deal. And I've always had questions and have never had the forum to sit down with someone who is as knowledgeable as you about this topic, where we can just kind of dive in and kind of get all these questions answered. So appreciate you being here, Mary Beth. I guess to kick it off, prior to being at Norfolk Southern, why don't you talk us through your history from being at Agnes Scott, through Georgia Tech, through Georgia Power to where you are today?
No, thank you for having me. And I'm excited to have this conversation because I'll just say, I moved over to the railroad, Norfolk Southern, 2 years ago. And prior to coming over, I thought I had an idea about what rail was, freight rail, how it operated. I had worked with them quite a bit when I was at Georgia Power doing business recruitment for the state of Georgia alongside our state partners. But what I realized is there's a lot more nuance to how projects can utilize rail than I really understood at a deep level. And so I think that is really interesting. So I will not claim to be a longtime railroading expert, but what I will say is that there are so many ways that we can proactively be engaged with so many different people across the industry to help them with their goals, achieve their growth objectives. And so that is something that I have been incredibly excited about. With all the different things that I have my hands in these days, it all comes back to that kind of proactive engagement and how we can help better talk about the ways that we can support industry. So I started out, I went to Agnes Scott. International relations was my major in undergrad, and then I ended up working at a power company. So how that translated together, you know how you fall into internships, and I will say to anybody in the world that internships are a great way to get introduced to your career trajectory. So I ended up in our research department, and I have to tell you, that is so foundational for everything that I have done since then.
And this is at Georgia Power?
This is at Georgia Power, but I say that because everything about that laid the groundwork for being able to navigate very complex topics and learning how do you extract meaningful information in storytelling. And it sounds counterintuitive that storytelling would be at the heart of all of this heavy industrial, whether you're recruiting a manufacturer or, at the time I was, Georgia Power has a bigger swath of, companies that make sense to utilize their services because the need for electricity is ubiquitous.
Mm-hmm. And actually, would you mind if I pause you right there?
Yeah.
So for people that don't sit inside Georgia, I sat in Georgia and Atlanta for a very long time, and now I sit in Charlotte. Georgia Power is not just a utility company inside of Georgia. Georgia Power is a huge economic development engine.
It is.
I think that's very unique to a lot of people that may be listening outside of Georgia. They're like, why are we talking about a utility company? But I think in Atlanta and in Georgia in particular, Georgia Power plays a much bigger role.
It plays a very large role. And a part of that is because of the way that economic development is structured. So on projects, there's always a utility partner paired with a statewide project manager. And so that cross-section between, you've got state government, you've got the incentives piece. Now, I'm speaking, for economic development projects. Right. So, and then you've got the technical expertise that comes from institutions like utilities, and it works so well. Now, in the states that I serve now, which is 22 states now that I work at Norfolk Southern, there's a lot of that same connectivity with our utility partners, whether it is TVA or Duke Energy or Dominion Energy or AEP. So there are wonderful partners out there that we work with day in and day out on the railroad side that are doing something very similar. But I will say, my time at the utility was truly a foundational place to be because I think it has informed so much of what I'm working on now at Norfolk Southern, which is it works. There's so much that's going in between. How do you make sure that the technical expertise that's available at these companies, whether it's the railroad or whether it's a utility, come to the forefront of that conversation with prospective customers? And how do you blend that together so that you get to the best solution as quickly as possible in support of the pursuit of really good industry?
Right. And so so your role, if we boiled it down, you sit at the intersection of real estate, the companies that are looking to utilize rail, and you're looking to figure out how you can get all these tumblers to click into place for wonderful mega sites, sometimes small users. We talked about that a little bit before the show. But you're looking to get all those tumblers to click into place so that these large projects are hatched, birthed, and done inside the United States. Correct?
Yes. Now, and that's a nuanced perspective, right? And economic development and industrial development, which, is a little bit closer to what I work on now from the freight side, it is complex in the sense that you have to think holistically about the life cycle of a project. So if a company is making $1 billion investment or many, many hundreds of millions of dollars, they're not making that decision based on a 5-year stint. They're looking at a term that's closer 30, 50 years. And so that collaboration piece that is just, I think the United States does it better than almost any other country in the world. Just from my experience of traveling around and having dedicated professionals that do this day in, day out to make it easier for companies to make informed and educated decisions about where they're going to locate. And they do, and the site selection consultants that we work with every day to help make those decisions possible, they are tremendously helpful and kind of bridging that gap between what a company needs and thinks they need, and then, kind of getting the right people in the room.
And many of those groups sit here in Charlotte, correct?
Yes.
And you're here to visit a handful of them while you're in town?
Absolutely. Had dinner last night with some friends. Look, we work with some amazing people around the country that have such tremendous expertise that we're able to come together and we're able to take the expertise that we have expertise of our key partners and stakeholders, the states that we serve and the local economic development authorities that are based there that are really the backbone of, the communities that we serve, and all come together. And I know that sounds kumbaya, but I truly mean it. It is a team sport through and through.
100%. And anyone that's listening to this or has been involved in one of these projects understands there are so many pieces that need to come together for these things to work out just right. And it's a ton of work and a ton of effort. And we appreciate you quarterbacking it on behalf of Norfolk Southern. I guess let's jump in. So
yes, do it.
I am high level relatively familiar with rail, right? There may be people listening to this that, other than their Christmas train around their tree, have not had any interaction with rail in their entire career and may be interested in it, right? So talk us through, from a high level, what is rail in the United States, specifically freight rail?
Great question. So, kind of starting at the beginning, the United States in its, more modern form, right, growing up in the last 300 years, was really built on rail. And it was the expansion of rail across the United States.
I picture those guys nailing the golden spikes in, connecting east and west, right?
Exactly. Yep. So that long history and the dandy gangs and all of that, it's all there. That is something that I think is it's sometimes lost, that sense of connection back to, because we're a 200-year-old company. So a lot of historical perspective, a lot of growth. And one of the things you and I were talking about this earlier is that I didn't know the connection to rail outside of the industrial space until I got over here. And I didn't realize that how many things that we touch, consumer products that we touch. So, Amazon and UPS are huge customers of ours because they're moving electronic TVs, they're coming in from the ports and then we touch all of the ports on the East Coast, the Gulf, and the Great Lakes. Okay, well, all of those equipment that's being moved to their distribution points, oftentimes via rail. So
Well,
the
and that
package
was
that you got
shocking to
on,
me, right?
yeah,
And we were talking about that. So when I picture Amazon, I picture third-party sellers that are private labeling goods, usually
hmm
from overseas, bring them in, and then selling them through Amazon. But what they do is they'll receive a shipment of 1,000 TVs, and Amazon just requires them to get it into one of their facilities, right? So they're sending all 1,000
basically.
TVs into one facility. It is then Amazon's job to distribute those goods throughout the entirety of the United States to make sure they're able to get to people within 2 days, right? And so I had not thought about Amazon utilizing the rail beyond the products arriving at the warehouses. They need to distribute that inventory to get it where it needs to be ready to be delivered in 2 days. So
Exactly.
I just hadn't thought about an Amazon package arriving or getting to a DC distribution center via rail. And that's fascinating to me. I just hadn't thought about that.
No, and we have a really strong intermodal network that moves products very quickly. So you think there's the for us, it's kind of the golden triangle because we cover the eastern half of the U.S. So roughly speaking, all the states east of the Mississippi River. So you think, Chicago all the way down to New Orleans and everything over, give or take. And then we connect with all of the other Class 1 railroads at what's called interchange points. And so those interchange points are, in those major western boundary cities. So think of Meridian, Mississippi, Chicago, Kansas City, New Orleans. And so that connectivity makes it very easy for companies to be able to move goods from West Coast to East Coast to West Coast, all the way up into Canada and into Mexico. So there's a lot of collaboration that happens, even though all of the networks are privatized. And so that's something that is very different from other parts of the world, is that this is a private freight network. We do have interchange points. We have interchange agreements with our partners, our Western carrier partners that we technically compete against, right? But it's truly a rising tide lifts all boats kind of scenario where if we're all kind of working together, we can make all of the movement of freight and movement of goods and the movement of all of these companies work.
So that's fascinating. So my misconception has always been that if I see a Norfolk Southern car, it's sitting on Norfolk Southern rails. And what you're saying is that if I'm in LA and I see a Norfolk Southern car, it may be sitting on, and I won't name your competitors, a Western carrier partner's rail. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, so
Yeah.
actually, I learned something that I didn't know a couple of years. Okay, when I came over to the railroad, I didn't realize this. Okay, so say you have a unit train that is being moved from the West Coast to the East. The only thing that's going to change once you hit between a Western carrier's tracks and ours is going to be the operator of the train, like the people that are operating the train. So you could technically have a Western carrier locomotive on the East Coast, and you could have a Norfolk Southern locomotive on the West Coast, even though it's being operated by a different railroad.
Oh, no way.
Which is interesting.
That is
It's like,
interesting.
I mean, who
It's
knew?
so interconnected and it's so complicated. So continuing on kind of like
Yeah.
a Rail 101, why do people elect to use rail in the first place, right? And I have my own understandings of this. I'd love to hear yours, but why rail? Why not use a car? Why not use UPS? Why not use
I'm glad you asked this question.
A truck, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's several different reasons that I think many people need to think of when they think of their supply chains. Okay, so anything heavy, bulky, things that you need to move in large quantities, great for rail.
So like coal, corn,
Yes. Agribulk,
pellets. Yeah.
metals and construction material. So think aggregates, cement materials that go in there, cooking oils, like you name it, things like that you move. We move a lot of sugar and flour because those come in bulk. So
America.
bakeries around America,
Yes.
tons of that.
Love it.
So a lot of the input materials that go into pet food manufacturing, like all of that is in there. And then some fun commodities that I think is interesting is, beer, wine. Now, the automotive, I don't know, I didn't realize this, how many finished vehicles were moved by rail
Oh, I didn't realize that either.
in containerized cars. Yeah. Special cars designated. And that's the other thing. There are specialized cars for many commodities. Like your tanker car is going to be different from your gondola car, different from your hopper, and every commodity is going to have a different need. It's going to have a different set of offloading. I mean, it's fascinating. And so the automation and the technological advances and trying to get the right car at the right spot with the right crew to meet the right need of the customer to be able to get, and having all of that seamlessly work together is something that is mind-boggling.
100%. So before we wrap this up and summarize kind of Rail 101, did you call it the Schnabel car?
Okay, so I just learned about this morning, so you heard it here first. So in terms of like specialized cars that move specialized equipment, learn today, because I love learning. I mean, the curiosity piece is always there. It is specifically designed to move electric generators. So think of the generators that go into, power facilities. They
not
are
like
moved.
the one you've got behind your house. We're talking
No.
ones that
We're
are
talking
like
about the
size of
massive
a-
ones.
yeah.
It's 24 axles, I believe, and it's the Schnabel car. I mean, like,
The
what
Schnabel car.
a great name.
Is it Mr. and Mrs. Schnabel, or what? How do we get that name?
I need
We're
to
gonna
find
look
this
it
out.
up.
We're
gonna look it up.
gonna go deep dive, little Wikipedia action. But this car, I think there's less than 20 in North America. And I mean, if you think about electric generation, they truly cannot operate without having access to rail. And so we are so closely connected at a fundamental level with the utility providers across the country. Because of this fact, because they have large pieces of equipment. So we're very often moving, not just, I mean, look, the electric generators that are massive, that's a very specific move. But on a more regular basis, you will see transformers moving by rail. You will see, because they're also big, bulky, heavy. And that's something that's, I think, a big benefit of using rail is being able to move those heavy materials. The other piece, and this is one that I love, and I know, we've talked about many sustainability benefits, but in terms of an emissions perspective, you're talking about 75 to 95% emissions reduction between rail versus truck, that it's that much more efficient to move anything on on rail than it is truck.
So I guess going all the way back here, let's summarize this for the
Yes.
folks. So our country's built on rail. So
Yes.
over 200-year-old company, rail comes about kind of turn of the 19th century, late 1700s, early 1800s, if I remember. And so our entire country's built on this. It connects our whole nation. And I think, and someone can fact check me on this, I think the interstate infrastructure in our country wasn't until like the early 1900s, right? So for vehicles. So rail really has been the primary mode of transportation across this continent for a very long time. And people do it for a reason. And it continues to persist to this day because, and I actually, in one of the markets I used to cover in Atlanta, huge Purina plant. And there were nonstop rail cars. It's right across from the intermodal. And because of that, like you mentioned pet food as a huge consumer. And
we've
I
seen
would have never
a
even
lot
thought
of
about
pet
that.
food manufacturing.
Yeah. So we've got these huge things, or very heavy commodities moving via freight rail. And then to this day, it kind of keeps its place because, one, it's really cost effective to move those heavy things, but then two, the emissions are incredibly light. And that's a huge focus for a lot of the corporations and companies that I work with on a day-to-day basis. And so I guess moving forward, so the next topic, a huge part of your job is speaking with people that are coming from other countries into the United States and ramping them up on rail. And you were saying something, and I'll kind of tee you up for this. If I'm coming from Europe, 20% of our rail is freight and 80% is passenger, right? And we're moving most of our stuff via truck. Can you talk to me, if I'm coming from, let's say, France to the United States, help give me some perspective as to why that may break down when I get to the United States?
There's a couple of reasons that, and here's the thing, what I would say is that my ask of any company that's doing a site selection search is that they consider the market they're going into very thoughtfully through their supply chain lens. So if you think about the size of the United States, the distance between cities in the United States, the density of the United States across, most portions of it. I mean, obviously the Northeast is incredibly dense and we have a lot of, track that's there. And that probably mirrors closer to places in Europe and even Asia. But that density piece starts to change the game and change the numbers game. So you are trying to move product between, your new customer base that's in the United States and the distance are much longer. Also, I mean, you've got to think about, okay, on average, so different commodities will have different weights. So keep this in mind. One rail car could be the difference of like 3 to 4 trucks. So you take that into consideration, and then you add, the longer you're moving product, that's the more time that's there, the more people that you have to have, drivers. So that calculus starts to look really favorable for rail. So that's the kind of thing that is not necessarily as much, thought of as much for somebody who's just trying to replicate what they may have, a manufacturing facility in France or Germany or wherever they're coming from, or even in Asia, so Japan, and then coming here and trying to figure that piece out. And so what I'm trying to do is I want to make it as simple as possible for somebody to have that supply chain conversation up front. Because here's the other thing. I want people to know that we can be a bit of a matchmaker between capacity of existing customers that have input material that are closer to the consumption source and companies that are looking to build their supplier network in the U.S.
And
We
so
can help make that conversation easy and warm and start that, and help them figure out, not just from a site side, but also from what's the optimal point of where you need to locate versus where your input material is coming from versus your consumer base of where your material is going. So I don't know if you've heard the term OD pairings, but that was a term that I learned when I came over here. So a lot of the conversations between, when you ask like, okay, what's the pricing for, between here in Charlotte and in Chicago. Well, that would be an OD pairing, so an origin and destination pairing. And so much of what we do is kind of getting down into what lanes are you going to use and what's the optimum way to get whatever you need, whether it's input materials. So say you're a bakery and you need flour and sugar and it's coming from very specific origins, and then where's that destination? Is it Charlotte? Is it Atlanta? Is it some other town? So there's complexity there that we want to demystify.
And are some of those OD pairings, I have to imagine that there's certain runs that are going to be more expensive and more heavily trafficked than others, right? And so
Absolutely.
Is there a group that maybe is indifferent and they say, hey, let's go with a cheaper OD pairing than maybe the one that we were originally thinking? Well, so you were talking about matchmaking, right?
Yeah.
So when we think about matchmaking, like if I'm producing scrap metal and
Yes.
someone's coming to the United States who needs to purchase scrap metal and synthesize that, you're thinking holistically about how we can potentially pair those two groups together. And these aren't small quantities, right? Like this could be 20, 30 cars a day type of stuff. And you're trying to pair those two groups together. So you've got a kind of a creation point of that scrap metal and then a utilization point. And
Exactly.
trying to link them up on the same OD
Yes.
pairing lines. Okay. So
Yes, and I realize that sounds like, oh, that's a lot of moving pieces, literally, figuratively. But yes, that is essentially what we're trying to do is how can we help drive an optimization conversation so that there is, companies that are coming from abroad are making the most educated decision that they can. So a lot of what I am doing in my travels in Europe and in all of the business development work is actually starting at ground zero. Let's have here's how freight rail works in the United States. Here are all the ways that we can help you, and just keep it even basic to start with so that as they have additional conversations, they can start to feel more comfortable with the idea, oh, there's people that can help us there. There's people that can then help us figure out what could work, what's the right combination. And I'll be honest, if there's a solution that is not rail, I'll tell you. I have no problem being very candid and saying this pairing doesn't work, but this other OD pairing works really well. Now, factor in the fact that, and especially in Europe, the EU has very strict, stringent regulations about reporting around ESG goals. So that piece starts to become much more important. So if we can help them reduce Scope 2 and Scope 3 emissions and be able to certify that and give them actual information, that starts helping them from from that reporting standpoint. And so we have this really great tool that I love. So you can Google it and find it. So it's the carbon calculator. You can go in there, you can pick your commodity, you can pick a bunch of other factors, including your origin. And I mean, this gets back to those OD pairings, your origin, your destination, and it will spit out an entire report for you on the emissions that are voided by transitioning from truck to rail. So I highly encourage anybody who's interested to go play with that tool. It is very simple. You can go in and you can truly see that come to life. And that's based off of real data that is being fed from our locomotives. And we're talking about, the undulation of topography that is being factored in, all of that.
Fascinating. So, okay, let's keep moving here because I want to make sure we cover everything here. But before we do, just quickly summarizing. So I'm sitting in France.
Yeah.
You talked to me for the first time. You helped me to understand that France is the size of Texas. I'm going to a much larger country when I go to the United States than perhaps I've realized. Then I start to think about, hey, I've got a lot of these environmental sustainability initiatives imposed on me or I've elected into in Europe. And when I go and I look at the United States and I consider moving what it is I'm going to be moving via truck, that potentially blows up all of those initiatives and plans, and then enter rail in a big way that can help me solve a lot of those solutions or solve a lot of those problems that maybe I wasn't even aware of prior to coming to the United States.
We want to be there as a help. And here's the thing. This is not a truck versus rail is better scenario. I mean, it's an all above approach because we need all of it. So there's several different pieces of the puzzle. So yes, I work on the industrial development side, and our bread and butter is the direct rail service. So that is where you've got your mainline track and you have a lead track that comes off with a switch, and then you head into a piece of property that is being specifically served for one user, maybe several users, but
we call those spurs.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So that's our bread and butter on the ID side. But we are part of a larger organization that includes first and final mile. So that gets in transload facilities, also and then transload, another way we call it is like thoroughbred bulk transfer facilities. So near rail concepts is another piece of the pie. And then, of course, you've got intermodal. We even own a trucking company. Not many people know that.
I didn't know about that until you told me, right? What's the name of it?
Triple Co.
Yeah, there you go. So you've got a rail company and a truck company together, right?
So it's the combination. It's that, how do we optimize the entirety of the supply chain picture? And that's actually something that is becoming much more important now, given everything that is going on in the news that, we're all well aware of, is people are having to really think about their supply chains. And so we want to help.
I love it. Okay, so continuing on here, so let's talk more specifically about the sustainability initiatives that you all are putting in place and implementing across the United States. I guess off the top, we just talked a little bit about the environmental sustainability governance, those types of initiatives. That is, I would say, 6 out of 10 occupiers of real estate that I work with, that's top of their list as far as their concerns. And so why don't you talk about what Norfolk Southern's doing right now to try and meet those needs?
No, great thought. So we talked about the carbon calculator. So that is one way to go ahead and quantify, because it's all about the numbers, right? So some other things that we're doing, and this is across the board. So I think it's wonderful that we're putting our money where our mouth is. So we have initiatives that are internal to Norfolk Southern that are about how we are becoming more efficient and more green and having sustainability filter into everything that we do. And so that is looking at everything from locomotives, fuel, biofuels, renewable fuels, all of that, how that's being fed into our network. It's also about, different initiatives around our network where we can actually help provide support. So there's a project going on in the Elizabeth River that we helped initiate that is a living organism opportunity. So instead of building more concrete kind of seawalls, if you will, that we're able to create a living shoreline that is helping to clean the river, because you have mollusk, I think, are on there that are growing. I am not the expert here on this specific project, but what I will say is when I heard about this, I was like, that is cool. that it is that we are thinking about how we invest in our own infrastructure. Also, electric cranes. How do we move? How do we adapt and reutilize or utilize new technologies? We're using a lot of AI and technological programming in order to optimize supply chain solutions. So this train is here and there and the pairings and all of that. And how do you move goods and keep the network and the most fluid that it can be? So all of that is coming together. I know there is work with Georgia Tech on imaging. So how do you quickly create corridors, pathways, I don't know what you would call it, where the trains can actually run through an imaging, like at full speed, can run through an imaging system, and all of these metrics are taken, and you can check every little piece of it, and that's from a safety perspective. So I love that we're inviting all of that kind of nuanced improvements in terms of paying attention to every little facet. Well, because the other thing I was going to mention, and you're probably going to get there. So latest and greatest, I'm very excited about a new initiative that our Chief Sustainability Officer, Josh Ragland, has recently rolled out. And so that's Rail Green. So we are Rail Green, all one word, capital R, capital G. You can look it up. So we have partnered with 123 Carbon out of Amsterdam, and it is a certificate-based program that is so we're allowing our customers to basically buy into a program that allows them to buy biofuels and then put that on the network and then be able to claim the certificates that they can then use for reporting purposes for the Scope 2 and 3 emissions. So this is truly taking it to the next level. Now, we are the first Class 1 railroad or large freight railroad, but our shipping partners from around the world, several of them have taken that on. So it's not like we're the first in the transportation industry to take this on at a big level. But man, oh man, I think this is exciting stuff for us to be able to offer these opportunities for our customers to engage even more. Now, that's as we also evolve and integrate more of these opportunities.
Yeah, so I'd love to, like the great Michael Scott once said, explain it to me like I'm 5. So let's go through that one more time and help, maybe for someone who might have missed it, help me better understand how that works, right? So am I buying credits and then utilizing those credits elsewhere? Maybe I said in Europe and I'm buying credits from Norfolk Southern and then using them for my initiatives in Europe, or am I using them for my rail initiatives in the United States? Talk to me about how that works. That is a great way.
Right? I'm glad you're nuancing this out, because that is something that I recently learned about this program. Again, this is not my program, so it's Norfolk Southern's, but obviously Josh could speak to it much more eloquently than I can. But I learned that it's an inset program versus an offset program, and what's great about it being an inset is that you can actually attribute it to the fuel consumed, like on the network. So it is based off of their needs in the U.S. So the company, it's based off of their OD pairing.
Interesting. Okay.
Which is an inset. So it means
so I've never heard of anything called an inset. Like I've only heard offsets, right?
An offset would be closer to you do something over here to offset something over there.
Yeah.
No, this one is like...
You have a solar farm. I have a massive emissions producing plant of some sort. And I'm saying, hey, thank you so much for your solar farm. I'm going to take some of your credits and wash what I'm doing over here. What you're saying is it helps me understand.
It's absolutely attributed. Yes. And you can, and our partner out of Amsterdam, they are able to certify that. That's the thing. It's being able to absolutely attribute it.
Okay, so this is specifically what I'm doing as a company to provide some type of sustainability to the grid, whatever grid that is, as opposed to, hey, someone else had some really good behaviors. We're paying money to take advantage of those. Where this is, I am actually doing the right thing here as a company, and that to me is important as well, right?
It's a great option that is now available, because there's all sorts of we have carbon credits that we have available for our customers. So there's other tools that we have in our toolbox based off of different initiatives that we have. So I'm not saying that we don't have other things. I just think this is a really interesting new one to hit the market for us, that we can help our customers reach their goals, because their goals are important to us.
Right. That's wonderful. Well, thank you for walking us through that. I guess the next thing, and this is kind of a topic of conversation daily for me and the occupiers that I work with right now, but there is a lot going on geopolitically and
Yeah.
economically, specifically as it relates to trade and tariffs. And that word, I'm hearing it nonstop throughout the course of the day. Let's not look at this politically. Let's be apolitical. But
Yeah.
how are the tariffs and what is going on globally affecting what it is you do on a day-to-day basis?
So I have no problem, touching this subject because I think that what's happening now is amplifying a lot of the great conversations that have been going on with customers for years. So really, it's that the tariff conversation is really driving a supply chain conversation. Okay, well, this is our bread and butter. Let's dig into supply chain. So while we may see the effects of how the conversations are evolving geopolitically or otherwise, we're still there to help kind of navigate those conversations and think about, okay, how do you best position yourself at the right spot at the right time, and at the right location between thinking about where you're going to get your input materials. So like where is all your stuff going to come? Where's your supplier base and where's your customer base? And so a lot of the work that I'm doing around and the team is doing. So I mean, look, I'm not a one-woman show.
This is a massive company.
It's a massive company.
Fortune 300, you said, correct?
Yeah,
Yep.
tons of people are working very closely together in order to navigate all of this and put the right people in place. So it's very much a team approach, both internally and then obviously a team approach across the economic development spectrum. But all of that is to say is that the site work that we're doing and all of the conversations around proactively thinking about site development, site growth, site management, acquisition.
And ready sites, right?
Ready sites,
Yeah.
yeah. So we have some new initiatives coming up and that are in motion and definitely want to talk about that as well. And so all of that is coming together so that we can help demystify and also take away that fear that there's some underlying issue that's going to crop up out of nowhere. We want to put as much information in the hands of all the companies that are trying to navigate where they need to end up, how they need to, position themselves. Because again, it's a 15, 30, 50-year decision that's being made. So a couple of, before we get into the Ready Prime Sites program, which I definitely want to talk about, I think it's also interesting to just see, one anecdote is that we're seeing an uptick in the amount of, goods and coming through the port and kind of stockpiling to some degree. So that is one thing that is like, you definitely see it in the numbers. Now, if that's going to hold in terms of, the uptick in volume, well, that remains to be seen. But that is one thing that we've,
Right.
seen in the last 2 months is an uptick in folks trying to let me try to get ahead of it and stockpile as much of the raw material as I can and the goods that I can.
And what we're seeing on the real estate side, so there are a lot of groups that have put certain projects on hold. But the thing that's impressed me the most is how quickly companies are adapting. And a lot of them have anticipated this for months. And they're taking advantage of, hey, maybe I produce something in China, but I can move it to Australia at 0% tariffs, and I can substantially modify it, then bring it into the United States. Or maybe I'm bringing it in through Mexico, substantially modifying it there, or a foreign trade zone or something like that. They've been thinking about this nonstop for months, and it's incredible to see just how quickly these solutions are getting put into place. There's some companies that have millions of SKUs where it's just going to take them a very long time to figure it out. But if you have 6, 7, maybe even 20 SKUs, like you have already ideated and figured out what your strategy is, and you're already putting it in place. And by the way, you have contingency plans down the line as well as to what you're going to do when this all goes back to normal, if it does, right? So I can see how that would impact your world for larger users, right? If rail's coming into play. And I think more so, and while I was in Atlanta for a long time, the Ready Site program, getting things just teed up, ready to go, so that when someone pulls the trigger, they're absolutely ready to go. That's so impressive to me, the amount of work that goes into that. And we'll talk about that in a second. But it allows people to build these massive projects very quickly, especially if they're tied into rail. And very quickly in my real estate world and your rail world may be different from someone else's very quickly, but in a matter of years as opposed to 5, 6, 7, right? So
I mean, look, plant development, manufacturing development, like it's not the fastest process in the world. So where we can de-risk for our customers, that's what I'm working on. I'm working on de-risking that part of the decision, the supply chain, the site side. Like that's where I'm really putting my time in.
I'm sure of it. And we talked about how the interconnectivity of the Norfolk Southern rail system with Mexico
Yes.
and Canada, right? And so that would be your primary international kind of trade routes, I would imagine, getting the freight across those two borders specifically. So help me understand, like, is that something you're able to serve? Is that something you're actively serving? Like, how do you go about serving those other countries and moving freight between those two?
So, I mean, I would say probably more often than that is the partnerships with the ports. So, the partnerships with ports all along the East Coast, the Gulf, the Great Lakes, that's, a lot of freight is moving through those ports. And so, our partners there are incredible and tremendous. And obviously, our shipping partners as well that we work really closely with because their customer base is using the shipping lines, and then those are moving through the different various ports, and then they're moving on our network in order to then, get throughout North America, essentially.
Well,
And then
and
we also have, over 250 plus short line partners that are amazing extensions of the Norfolk Southern network. So you take our network of 19,000 plus route miles, and then you multiply that because of all of the partners that we have in the eastern part of the US. I mean, that is a lot of reach that allows you to get to a lot of different people and network, you can reach so far into North America. Now, in saying that, when you think of, Canada or Mexico, that is where we have relationships with our Western carriers. And so there's a lot of negotiated kind of lanes, and there's so many things that's already done behind the scenes and has already, been proactively put in place to make it easy to move freight seamlessly throughout North America. And I think that's something that, we talk about a lot, especially, with our international clients is, look, we're going to make it super easy for you to be able to navigate this because it's a complex, big world, and there's a lot of nuance to it.
Yeah. Well, and you were talking about how interconnected you are with the ports. I think some people may underestimate that. And Stacey Watson, a shared friend of ours,
Georgia Port Authority.
yeah, shared friend of ours, Stacey
Yeah.
Watson, head of economic development for the Georgia Ports Authority. He toured us through that port, and not a lot of people are going to get the chance to tour that port. But I knew there was some level of connectivity between rail and the port. What I did not realize is that they are taking the containers off the ships, jockeying them over, and then building a train on the dock.
Yes.
That is incredible. And so that level of connectivity, I think a lot of people may underestimate that. And I think it's really impressive. So things are coming from our foreign trade partners, hitting the dock, being built onto a train, and then sent up to Atlanta, wherever it is that they're going. And there's very little lost time between those two.
Lots of coordination and a lot of and there's different commodity specific equipment that's based at the different ports. So you have different things coming in through different ports in different ways. Now, containerized, I mean, you have your containerized and you have your bulk kind of port facilities. And so, yeah, it's a very interesting and complex, but yet seamless.
Yeah. Well,
in a
and
way.
it helps. Hopefully for the people listening, it helps them understand why people like you exist in such a massive capacity, and how you're able to help people piece all this stuff together and put it in a simple bite-sized package that anyone can understand on any board and get a project moving. So thank you for what it is you do for the Southeast and certainly the whole East Coast and across the country. Now, I guess the next thing is just, hey, what's next for rail? And so what are you guys seeing and what are the trends that you're seeing and what are you guys doing to kind of plan for the future?
So big thing that is, on the horizon. Well, actually, it's not even on the horizon. It's here. Is a lack of rail ready or development ready sites. So you've had a lot of tremendous activity in the last couple of years, last few decades, but. I mean, think about how much activity has come through in the last couple of years. So you have a lot of sites that have been taken down for great manufacturing opportunities. And then you have all these other sites where it's like, okay, how do we replenish this lost inventory? And so that is something, if I don't have an inventory of sites, well, then I can't serve these great, future customers that I would love to have and that are generating carloads.
And so these sites, are these public sites? Are these private sites? Traditionally private, correct?
Yes,
Yes.
no, I mean, it's true. So if you think about, okay, so we have one of the things that is very, important to the work that we do is our Insights platform. So this is our property viewer platform. So think of the Zillow for rail serve sites on the East Coast. And these are Norfolk Southern serviceable sites that we've vetted through our industrial development managers that are based out in the territory that are actively being marketed.
And so I'm able to look this up.
Yes, this is
if I'm
all
a rail user, I'm able to go online and track this down.
Insights.norfolksouthern.com, which I'm sure we could probably put in the show notes, so that you could have a direct link. So all of this is public. You don't have to download anything. It's not an app. Like, you could just go and you could start playing, and it is mobile ready. We launched a new platform in January with our partners at GIS Web Tech. So I'm very excited. So a project
is wonderful.
I was working on for a year to really take the platform to the next level has come to fruition. And so that's incredibly exciting for our team.
So for those sites that you're talking about, this is incredible. So if I go on and let's just say I look at a state like North Carolina where we're sitting right now, are we talking 5 ready sites? Are we talking 10 ready sites? Are we talking 100 ready sites per state? Like, in general, order of magnitude, like how many sites do you all have teed up and ready to go in a typical state?
So okay, so there's 700 plus being actively marketed as of right now on the Insights platform.
So that's 22 states.
That is 22 states worth of sites. Now, those sites are not all in the same level of readiness, and that is a big initiative that we have going on right now. So we have partnered with the Site Selection Guild and their Ready Sites program, which is a vetting process. So they're basically setting a national standard for levels of site readiness that take into account due diligence, infrastructure, so water, sewer, utility, all the way to, connectivity. So, what's nearby? Is it on rail? Is it, near an interstate? Does it have 4-lane, 4-lane highway access? Does it have multiple levels of ingress egress?
I was actually going to ask you about that for the real estate people that listen to this podcast. Yeah. Is a ready site, does that mean it's padded out, utilities stubbed, and like we can go out there with a construction trailer tomorrow and build a building? Or is it, hey, this may still be rough land, but it's got our utilities, service to the site, it has the rail there? Like, help me understand on that spectrum,
yes,
how raw is a ready site and how padded out and teed up and ready to go is it?
It's kind of across the board, and that's where the designations come in. And that is where it's, for us, thinking about how we were going to go about, taking on whether we needed a third-party verified program, if we wanted to take it on ourselves. We ultimately decided that this was a great place to go. Now, part of this actually comes down to, yes, you want your site certified, but you also want it marketed. So we'll get back to that piece of it, because I think that's also another cornerstone of, okay, that's great that you have all these sites, but what are you going to do about it? How are you going to get those sites in the hands of the right people at the right time that are, making very big decisions? So the levels of readiness vary. Now, at the base level, so you have your bronze, silver, gold, platinum, essentially. And
okay,
then
so similar to like LEED or something like that. How many boxes have you checked?
Exactly. So there is that piece of it. So a platinum site is going to have a much higher level of due diligence, pad ready. It truly is turnkey.
Potentially already the roads through the site linking. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So there's a lot more that's expected out of a platinum site. But what it does do is you've got all this rich information about these sites. So again, de-risking is the name of the game. We're de-risking right up front, and we have access to all that information, and our partners have access to all that information about the site that they may own, the community may own the site, we may own the site, a private developer may own the site, or you have Farmer Joe that owns the site. So, or Farmer Jill. So we're working with all of them to help elevate their level of site readiness and site understanding and due diligence and all the pieces that come together, so that we can hopefully move the needle on bringing a really great opportunity that generates jobs, capital investment, increases the tax base for the communities that we serve, and then also generates carloads.
Yes, love that. And so when I think about risk with a site, right, I'm thinking about environmental
Hmm.
risk. So a lot of those boxes are probably checked. Is there contamination in the soil? Something like
Yep.
probably rock, geotechnical, the
Hmm.
wetlands that
Hence the
surround it.
phase one
Yep,
environmental
yep,
studies,
yep.
huge cultural and resources survey. I
Yes,
mean, we could go into a litany of all the
yes.
little nuances. Yes.
For all you developers out there, cultural phase ones, I hope you don't have to do one anytime soon. But yeah, we had to do one on a site back in Atlanta. There was a ridge that was an
Hmm.
archaeologically designated site, and we did not know that going into it. So these are the types of things that would be de-risked. We found that out
Yes.
in due diligence. But if you had $1 billion international project coming along, finding out that there were artifacts all over the site at late stage of the game, that could be a serious problem.
I mean,
Um,
that is where we're, really taking advantage of. And I will say we're not doing this alone. There is a lot of great work that's being done across our network at the state level, at the local level around site preparedness, site readiness, and site advancement. And so we are looking at that across our network in a nuanced way. So we're trying to partner with each of the state and meet them where they are because I mean, look, we're one company. We have a certain amount of capital investment that, we can deploy for projects like this that I can justify to our finance team for an ROI. But there's been some really great programming that's come through, and two that I'll mention. So the growing Alabama tax credit has been something that we are taking full advantage of. And so for those that don't know about it, I mean, it's a great opportunity for us to take tax liability, which we have to pay anyways as a corporation, and take a portion of that for qualified, vetted, and approved projects. So let me say that. Um, and put it towards infrastructure and grading and all of these things that are not typically rail related. I mean, rail adjacent, but not our core
mhm.
business. And we're able to take advantage of that. So we have put, I mean, for instance, the near mega site in Etowah County, Alabama, we've invested over the last couple of years over $9 million. I don't have $9 million on a yearly basis to just like deploy to
To an
one
individual
site
site, right?
and be able to justify it. I mean, because it comes down to being able to justify it. So the fact that we're able to take advantage of a program that a state has created and do it in a way that makes a lot of sense for us. I mean, that to me is something that has just, I mean, that program has been great for us. Now, we're also working with, so like Team PA, so Pennsylvania. They have been working with Deloitte to help them assess their sites, look at acquisition targets, like where should they be looking in order to find more sites because they need more sites in their own inventory. And so we partnered together with them to do it from a corridor perspective on Norfolk Southern. And so that partnership right there, that's a great example of us coming in using our GIS resources, our technical expertise, I mean, our engineers to sit down with Team PA, with Deloitte and walk through, hey, here's some larger parcels with reduced number of owners because, there's that piece of it. You don't want, to
Now you're in
have
my world,
20.
yeah.
Yeah, I know. You don't want 20 owners that you're having to negotiate with that, are not in a floodplain, that are not really wet, that are mostly flat, that are near utility infrastructure, near a workforce base, a base of workforce that they can draw from. There's a lot of elements that are taken into account. And so, yeah, that's another way that we're trying to support our partners along this journey because it's going to take all of us working together to figure this out. We're even in the process of acquiring a large piece of property that we really want to make sure is reserved for a great rail project. And so I'm not afraid to take a look at our existing inventory of sites. And we've been working on that. Okay, what do we keep? What do we sell? What do we divest of? I mean, you name it. And then in rare circumstances, what do we acquire? So it's a fun time right now. I feel like there's a lot of proactive momentum that is not just it's not just me shouting it from the rooftops. It is truly, it's coming out of the mouths of governors. It's coming out of the mouths of our federal government. coming out of the mouths of our utility partners, us. I mean, we're all trying to work towards this sense of how do we make sure that we're building the future for tomorrow.
Right. So you mentioned, we chewed through a lot of our ready site inventory, probably 2020 to 2024, if I had to guess.
Our highest level of readiness. Yes.
Okay. So if there's 700 on the platform right now, what would you have imagined that was maybe in 2020? We're not going to hold you to it, but rough order of magnitude. Was it 800? Was it 1,000? Or was it 750? Help us understand kind of what that is and how much ground we have to make back up.
That's a great question, because we go through that inventory every year to 2 years. We go through every single site and we have conversations. So this year, the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025, we've been going through site sheeting. So shout out to my GIS team, Brent and Rakesh, because they have been working so diligently, because something that's so important is the data integrity. And so I think at one point we had a couple of years ago, it was 800 plus sites actively being marketed. And now we've reduced that down to, just over 700, 730 something. Now, part of that was sites being taken. Part of that was cleaning up what we had and saying, hey, something has changed over here. So a school came in, a Target, something has changed the dynamic that no longer makes the site a really great fit for rail. So therefore, there's some that dropped off just naturally from, just taking a much more cornered approach to it.
So mid 800s down to 700, probably, what would you say is the divide on that? Maybe 30 of those were getting cleaned up and then the rest were actually truly taken?
But, well, you gotta think of how many plants truly do land that are going to take up sizable property. So it's probably, a smaller portion that were taken down for actual sites, for manufacturing. But
in my experience, it seems like every year we talk about maybe 3 or 4 per state mega projects that go in, like SK Battery or one of those types of facilities along 85. If you've not seen it going up and down the 85 corridor when you're coming into Atlanta on the left-hand side, that SK Battery facility is something. Okay, wonderful. Well, I guess to wrap up here, who is it, first off, that should be getting in touch with you, and when? And then if someone's trying to get in touch with Norfolk Southern and just in general, when should they do it in their process?
Early and often, at a bare minimum, and here's why. So as you could probably tell from all of the topics that we covered today, there's a lot of complexity, and there's a lot of cost in rail infrastructure. And so and there's a lot of geometry, tons of geometry. All of our engineering team they are brilliant at that. So our technical services team does conceptual plans day in and day out that's looking at, how much space of a site needs to be taken up to fulfill the need of that industry, because every industry is going to have a different need. So they're going to have different, days of week per service that they need. Okay, maybe it's 5 cars a day, but maybe it's 20 cars per week, but all of that is stacked into,
on Friday.
Exactly. So you have to design your site accordingly. And then even if you don't design it for rail right away, if you think that you're going to need it, we also need to talk to you before you decide where you're going to just lay out on the site so that we can protect it for future. Not that you had to build all the infrastructure out. So there's stuff like that comes into play. So early and often, and yes, always happy to be a sounding board. And so that is, if no one remembers anything, is that please reach out. Now, there's several ways that you can kind of get in touch. So you could go to insights.norfolksouthern.com. So our Insights platform has the contact information for all the individual sites of the industrial development managers that are responsible for them, that live and know and breathe those sites. So their pictures on there, their email, their phone number, so give them a ring at any point. Also, you can go to norfolksouthern.com to the industrial development section, and then all of our contact information. Mine, the team, the other industrial development directors, our group vice president, Craig Hudson, and all of our industrial development managers, so there's several ways that you can find our contact information.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate it. It's been great catching up with you.
Thank you for having me.
This
has been a fun conversation.
Absolutely. And thank you for teaching us a little bit about rail. So
my pleasure.
Have a great rest of your day. And thank you guys for tuning in.
You too.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you for joining us on the Industrial Voices podcast. Appreciate you tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast, Please subscribe to this show on your preferred platform and consider sharing with a friend. And if I can be of any help to you or your team regarding your real estate, please email me or visit my website, info in the show notes.